want to jump into today's topic, which is leveraging rich media and video in SharePoint. Our presenter today is Kyle Schaffer. He's a senior UI developer at Protiviti. As always, I'm your moderator, Steve Witt here at Protiviti. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presenter rights over to Kyle so we can jump in. And again, I apologize for that.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So while we're pulling up the presenter here and I can get my screen showing, I just want to do a quick introduction of myself. Again, as Steve mentioned, my name is Kyle Schaffer. I've been doing design work in SharePoint for over 6 years now. And that's pretty much what I do all day, every day. You know, I design and customize and architect the designs for SharePoint sites. I've worked in SharePoint 2007, 2010, and now in 2013. And especially with the growth of mobile, the growth of rich media, the growth of our bandwidth, and all the cool things that we can do with our websites and our information systems, the demand for doing rich media has definitely increased. And we've seen that not only in SharePoint, but in the web in general. And so the topic we wanted to cover today was leveraging rich media, and more specifically leveraging video in SharePoint. And while I am going to point out some things that are specific to SharePoint 2013, if you're not on the 2013 platform yet, that's not a problem, because I'm going to kind of give you some tips and some pointers to also do these things on the older platforms, specifically SharePoint 2010, which I know is still very popular, especially in intranet environments, internal environments. People are still using 2010 in quite a lot of places. But specifically, the thing I want to start out talking with today is HTML5. And if you guys aren't familiar with that technology, it's basically a new version that adds all these new capabilities to HTML. And you know, HTML is the technology that has been around since the beginning of the web. It's always been here. It's how you put images and links and text and content into your pages, and SharePoint is no different. You know, SharePoint has its own technology that Microsoft creates, but it rests on the shoulders of HTML. And now, especially in SharePoint 2013, it's actually using a new version of HTML called HTML5. And specifically, one of the features that HTML5 gives us is the ability to do video. And in the past, if you kind of look back at rich media and video historically on the web, it's always been, you know, back when YouTube first started, when all these video sites first started, Flash technology was basically the one technology that you used when you wanted to do video on the web. And that required people on their desktop browsers to install a plugin. Once you had that plugin, it would load video and do streaming, and you know, programmers could sort of control the streaming and all that technology behind the scenes. But what that gave us the ability to do was to stream videos very quickly to our computers, which obviously was very popular, and it gave rise to the growth of YouTube and Vimeo and all these other video sites that are very pervasive and very, you know, very prevalent in our internet daily lives. So the change in HTML5, the reason why they included this new thing that they're sort of walking away from Flash, is because what happened when the mobile browsers started coming out, and specifically I'm talking about iOS, so the iPhone and the iPad. Apple made a very conscious decision, sort of from, it was really influenced by optimization on mobile devices. So the problem they were having with Flash is that it would kill the battery life on these devices, and they didn't want that to be the experience that their customers had with those devices. So you go to a website, and if the programmer of that Flash video application that you used did a good job, it wouldn't be so bad. Did a bad job, you know, depending on how they programmed it, it could crash the device, it could kill the battery, it could do all sorts of things that they didn't want people to do with their devices. So, you know, Steve Jobs and Apple, they basically said, no plugins. We're not allowing plugins on these mobile devices. And this became a big issue for serving up rich media on the web. Because as you probably know, today, the device landscape, you know, you never know what device somebody's going to be on when they visit your website. You don't know if it's going to be an iPad, a tablet, an Android phone, an Android tablet, It could be all sorts of things that people are browsing with today. And if you have video content or any type of rich media like audio and data visualization and things like that, you can't guarantee that people are going to have the ability to do plugins on your website. So that old staple of let's use Flash and let's use even Silverlight, Microsoft's sort of version of Flash, that's going away. Those technologies are really only today, they're really only used as a fallback for older browsers. They're not really used as the primary way that we can serve rich media to web browsers and web devices today. So that's been a big shift, and that was a big change in HTML5. But the good news is now if you use HTML5, you can use this new video feature of HTML5 to serve up a video just like you would have done with Flash before, except because it's using HTML5, it doesn't require a plugin, and it's going to work on those mobile devices. It's going to work on Android phones and tablets. It's going to work on iOS phones and tablets. So that's the big advantage here, is that we're getting the ability to stream video and include rich media on our HTML pages without the need for a plugin, which is good news. So that sort of begs the question, how do we do this? And more specifically, how are we going to do this in SharePoint? So that's sort of the next part here. Basically, in HTML, I'm not going to show a ton of code here today, but I do kind of want to show you how this is done behind the scenes. But basically, if you want to put a video on a page, in your HTML code, you would put something like this. And this is the new format for videos in HTML5. There's this new tag or this new HTML element called video. And just like you would have an image on your page where you say img source equals photo.jpg or whatever, it's sort of the same thing, except you're saying video source equals movie.mp4, and that would be the path to your movie file. And you can give it a width and a height, and you can specify controls if you want people to be able to play and pause and have a meter where they can control tracking for the video. There's some options for configuration here, but this is the basic way on an HTML5 capable browser to insert a video into the page, and it works pretty well. It's pretty easy to use. The problem with this is browser support. So while it's easy, and that makes it really great and really easy to put a video onto your HTML5 capable device, the problem is coming up with some sort of format and some sort of video that's going to work on all devices. And that has been a big issue. Fortunately, it's getting better. Firefox just recently added MP4 support, so that's making it better. But basically, you can see here on the screen, we have a list of different video file formats, so that being MP4, WebM, and OGG. Those are three different file formats you can have when you create a video. Those are called the codecs, or the encoding algorithm that these videos use to save the file format. And unfortunately, you can see that no single format is supported on every single device. And that's been the issue. You can't just save your video file as an OGG and expect it to work everywhere, because OGG doesn't work on Safari and Internet Explorer, unfortunately. The same thing with WebM. It works on everything except for Internet Explorer and Safari. MP4, on the other hand, it's probably the most popular format for videos, but unfortunately, Firefox, until very recently, probably within the last 6 months, did not support MP4 on their browser, and that's mostly because MP4 is a very expensive cost to include that in your software, and Firefox and Opera are open source software, so they don't have a ton of money to throw into their software to support these codecs. But fortunately, they were able to work out an agreement where they are able to include MP4. I think Firefox today is on version 24, so it's still a few versions behind. So we do have good support now, especially for that MP4 file format. But you can sort of see the problem here. There's no one format that you can encode videos in that's just going to work everywhere. And obviously, Internet Explorer 8 and earlier doesn't support HTML5, so there's no support whatsoever for HTML5 video there. And that's also been a little bit of an issue. So what do we do about this? How do you handle this problem of video codecs not being supported across the board? And fortunately, there is a technique to help you support that. And basically what you can do is in your video HTML, you can specify multiple video files. And so you can say, ideally you would support MP4, so you have source src equals movie.mp4. But then you can also specify one or more fallback video formats. So you can say, well, if you don't support MP4, if you're on an older version of Firefox or an older version of Opera and other browsers, then you can use a secondary file format, movie.ogg. And so you can actually specify multiple formats. And then before you're done with that, what if your browser like Internet Explorer 8 and earlier doesn't support HTML5 video at all? Well, you can also specify a tertiary fallback where you actually use either Flash or Silverlight to load that video, just like we used to do 5 years ago, which was sort of the normal format there. So that's great. This is a very easy way for us to include our video and have it work on all devices just by formatting our HTML like this. The challenge here is really the effort that it takes to copy your video file and encode it in all these different formats and have a fallback Silverlight player that also can play those formats. That's the issue with it, is that while yes, we have the capability to do it, it's a lot of effort to copy your video file over and over and over. You can't just upload one file and assume it's going to work on every possible device. And that's really been the challenge here. So again, the idea here is that you can see that I'm putting the little browser icons next to each of these. So while most browsers are going to support that MP4 format, Opera and older versions of Firefox will fall back to the OGG format, and then Internet Explorer, older versions of that, and really old versions of Chrome and Firefox and all those browsers will also fall back to the plugin, which is what we used to do. In this case, we're using a ZAP file, XAP file, which is just a Silverlight file extension. So in this case, we would have a fallback Silverlight player that would require people to have that plugin enabled on their desktop browser, and then it would load the video file from there. Now the good news is that SharePoint 2013, if you have that version, does actually support this. It actually has this HTML code already sort of bundled up into a web part called the media web part. And this web part is pretty cool. It does not support OGG. So basically the SharePoint 2013 rich media web part, it uses HTML5 video, but it really only supports the MP4 format if you want to work cross-browser. But the nice thing is it automatically will fall back to the Silverlight fallback there. And there's a Silverlight web part, a Silverlight media web part already built into SharePoint. You actually get that with SharePoint 2010 and 2013. And it'll automatically fall back to Silverlight. So you get support automatically on Internet Explorer 8 and earlier. So that's the good news. If you have SharePoint 2013, you can get support for most browsers and most devices out of the box. You don't have to do anything crazy. As long as you put your videos in MP4 file format, it's going to probably work on about 95% of the browsers that you're serving to. It's going to work on most iOS and Android devices. It's going to work on mobile devices, on phones and tablets, and that's really the big win here for using the HTML5 video. There are some catches. You know, if somebody is on Opera, they're not going to see, they're not going to have support for an MP4 video, so they will have to fall back to the Silverlight. But chances are most Opera users are probably on an older mobile device, like an old touchscreen phone, or even BlackBerry used Opera for a while on their operating system. So chances are they're probably used to maybe not having full support for some websites, because those devices are generally like feature phones or the older smartphones anyway. So they may not have support for a lot of things on the web, not just these videos. So it's really something you have to take on a case-by-case basis. You have to look at your statistics, figure out what devices and what browsers and what support your users have. And if you don't want to have to go through all the extra work of encoding your video in multiple file formats, then you know, as long as 99% of your users or whatever are on devices that are capable of using either the Silverlight or the MP4 HTML5 video player, then you'll probably be in good shape. But again, it's sort of up to you. You kind of have to look at it and take it on a case-by-case basis. Now, one potential solution for dealing with this problem of not being able to support all possible devices is to use hosted video as opposed to using that Silverlight or that HTML5 media web part that comes with SharePoint. And what I mean by hosted video is basically, I mean, taking your videos and putting them on an external website and then pulling that back into SharePoint. And there's a lot of advantages there. So I kind of have a side-by-side comparison here of hosted versus on-premise. Hosted being in YouTube or Vimeo, and there's even a service in Windows Azure. Microsoft has a service that you can upload videos to, and it'll automatically convert your videos for you. On-premise being you would have your videos stored in SharePoint. So you would upload your files into a document library somewhere and try to show them within SharePoint. So there are benefits and challenges to both of these. You can see on the left here the benefits of having hosted video mostly is going to be automatic video format conversion. So you can upload, for instance, to YouTube, you can upload a WMV file, a Windows movie, a Windows Media video, or whatever that stands for, to YouTube, and it automatically converts that to OGG, to WebM, to MP4. You don't have to do any of that work. So it takes a lot of that stuff off your shoulders, which can be really valuable if you consider doing this. Also, performance. You get a big boost for performance because you're not hosting this in SharePoint. Videos can sometimes take a lot of bandwidth depending on how many users you have. So you're kind of offloading some of that performance into the cloud, and you're saying, you know what, we're using YouTube. Google's going to handle all the performance issues. As long as we have an internet connection, we really don't have to worry about it. So that's another benefit of using hosted video. There are also some challenges, obviously costs. Depending on which of those services you use, there may be a cost involved. And even YouTube, they offer some premium services. So if you want to have private videos and things like that where you can control access to those things, there will be cost involved. So that's something you have to consider. Also security. Vimeo and YouTube both allow you to upload videos for free, but those videos are public and out on the internet. So if you have videos that are internal for your organization, you really have to consider the security implications of hosting externally. You have to make sure that you can lock it down if you need to, and you have to consider the audience for your videos and if that solution is going to fit there. And there's certainly some benefits to doing it on-premise too. Number one, and if you have SharePoint 2013, it's easy. You literally just upload videos. You slap a media web part on a page and you're done. You get support out of the box for most mobile devices, for most tablets, pretty much anything except for Opera you're going to get support for, which is pretty great. That handles most of your users. Also, you're going to have more control over security because it's in your existing SharePoint environment. You already have groups and users in that environment, and you can control who can see it and who can contribute and who can edit and add items to that library, which makes it much easier to do. But there are challenges there as well. If you want to support some of those older devices and older browsers, you have to manually convert your video formats, and that can be a big effort depending on how many videos you have. Not all devices and browsers are fully supported, so again, you kind of have to look at your user base and figure out what are they browsing on, and is HTML5 video supported on their devices. And then performance is definitely a challenge. Again, depending on the size of your farm, the size of your user base, and how much video content you have, and the size of those videos, that could be a pretty taxing thing to hand off to your IT team, because multimedia is typically pretty large file sizes, so it's something you have to consider as well. And we'll look a little more specifically. I'll even jump into SharePoint 2013. I have a little site running here on my laptop, and I'll show you how to do this. But basically, if you want to pull this stuff into SharePoint, there's a couple methods to do that. So I talked about how SharePoint does this automatically, but more specifically, if we look at both SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013, they both offer out-of-the-box ways for you to put rich media into your pages. So, starting with SharePoint 2010, if you're still on that platform, it does have a Silverlight media web part. And that media web part supports a few file formats. You can see they're listed here. Again, the issue there is that Silverlight media web part will not work on mobile devices. So if you have a requirement for iPads, iPhones, Android tablets, it's simply not going to work for those devices. But it is there if you only need to support desktops. That's totally an option for you. It's going to work on desktops, and that's pretty easy to use. You can also, if you decide to go with externally hosted video, you can use HTML5 video in SharePoint 2010. You do, however, have to manually add the HTML to basically content editor web parts. And essentially what I mean there is you're going to go to YouTube where you have your video hosted. They have a little thing that says embed video, and you copy the code snippet out of there and paste it into your source code of your content editor web part. And it's really easy to pull a YouTube video into a SharePoint page in SharePoint 2010. That will give you support on mobile devices, but again, that's really only available if it's externally hosted. SharePoint 2013 definitely makes this job a little bit easier. SharePoint 2013 was kind of designed for the world of today with all these different devices. So while it still has that Silverlight media web part, pretty much the same as the previous version, it just looks a little nicer, they also have the HTML5 media part, web part, and you can see all the different file formats that support this, but audio as well, which is pretty handy. And you still retain the ability to do the HTML5 hosted video pretty much the same method as before. You can manually copy in that HTML into your pages and use HTML5 video that way. So before I let you guys go, I know we're running out of time here. I just want to show you very quickly, I have a SharePoint 2013 site here. And this is a publishing site, so it's just a regular SharePoint site. We have some pages and things like that here. I have a page that I created called Video, and what I'm going to do is just show you really quickly how that media web part works. So I'm going to edit the page. I'm going to scroll down here to our web part zones, and I'm going to add a web part to this header zone here. And if you look at your categories over here, I'm going to zoom in, you're going to see that under categories, one of your categories is media and content, and that's going to be the category you're going to look for. And then you'll see on the right here, you have a web part that says media web part, and that's the one we're looking for. And you can see over on the right in the description, it says used to embed media clips, video, and audio in a web page. And again, it doesn't really mention it, but this is using HTML5, so that's a pretty cool, I have to say, kudos to Microsoft for including HTML5 in SharePoint 2013, because it will work on your mobile devices, which is good news. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Add. It's going to drop that media web part onto the page. You see it just puts it right here. Now, one thing you do have to do to actually, you have to point it to a video. And in order to do that, you basically just click on the web part, and you'll see the ribbon at the top of the page changes to this Media tab. And on the Media tab, you can set options like the size of the video, do you start it automatically, do you loop it until it stops, and things like that. You can even give it a thumbnail image. You see that preview there on the left where it says Change Image. You can give it a thumbnail if you want to have something that appears before the video is loaded. But the one thing that we're going to look at right now is that button that says Change Media. So I'm going to click on Change Media really quickly. I already have a video that's uploaded. It's an MP4 video. I'm going to select that and hit Insert. And it's going to put my video on the page for me. So I'm going to just go ahead and save my page real quick so we can see how this works. But you can see right here, there's a play button. I can click on play, and it's going to start loading my video right on the page. So really, really easy to get started doing that. It has the full screen option. I can go full screen video if I want to. It even has embed code. So people, just like on YouTube, can pull this video into other websites or other places within your SharePoint environment, which is pretty cool. It has all the tracking and all those normal features. And if you actually sort of go in and dig into the code behind the scenes, you'll see that just like in our slide before, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but you basically have highlighted in blue there, you see there's a video HTML tag, so it is using HTML5. and then it has one of those source tags inside of it, and that's pointing to our MP4 file. And then you also see object below that source tag, which basically that's the Silverlight fallback. So if I were on Internet Explorer 8 and earlier, or an older version of Firefox or Opera, it'll actually, instead of loading it in this HTML5 player, it'll automatically switch to SharePoint Silverlight Media Player. So really, really easy to get really good support across the board if you're using that MP4 file type. So with that, I'm going to put some contact information up on the screen here. That's about all the time we have, but we definitely have time to take a few questions if anybody has anything.
Great, thanks, Kyle. I'll leave it open a little bit while here for questions. If anybody has any questions. No questions? Okay. Well, with that, that will conclude this week's 30 on Thursday. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And remember to come back in 2 weeks where we talk about the different hosting options for SharePoint, Office 365, which is on-premise, etc. Talk to you soon. Bye.